Each bastard has to pay. He thinks he can just waltz in here and destroy my neighborhood? That's Margaret Wilson, HOA president, mid-911 call to shut down my home office. Witch said I was ruining the neighborhood, so she called the cops on my home office. What she didn't know, I bought the company that signs her paycheck, and the only thing illegal was her attitude. Stick around, because when she tried to cancel me over a mailbox, I canceled her entire HOA. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. They called it Elbow Falls, but the name should have been Elbow Uppercut, with the way that HOA swings at people like it's Fight Club in cul-de-sac form. I rolled in with a dented Corolla, clearance bin cargo pants, and a reputation for failure that made me look like the kind of guy who eats beans straight from the can, which was exactly the point. I moved in undercover, with a hoodie that screamed divorced and a bank account that whispered lawsuit pending. The HOA took one look at me and decided I was poor enough to bully but not poor enough to evict. And leading the charge, Linda Cricket, president, executioner, and self-declared keeper of the color swatches. Linda Cricket was the kind of woman who treated bylaws like scripture and weeds like war crimes. She had the moral compass of a malfunctioning shopping cart and the smile of someone who just overcooked a cat. Within 48 hours of moving in, I'd received my first violation, wind chime aggression. Apparently mine sounded hostile. On day 3, it was visual tension from your lawn ornaments, and by day 5, she'd written me up for unlicensed porch energy. I didn't even know porches needed a permit to vibe. But Linda did. Oh, she knew everything. Except one tiny detail. I owned the management company that controlled her entire HOA budget. You see, 6 months before moving in, I bought Cobalt Residential Holdings, which conveniently owns Western Vista Property Group, the contract manager for this beautiful hellhole. It cost me $39,500,000, 0 cents, which is a small price to pay for petty satisfaction. I didn't buy this place to live in peace. I bought it to investigate HOA corruption from the inside out. Think of it like Undercover Boss, if the boss wore knockoff sneakers and got fined for mailbox tone. I was looking for abuse, and baby, Linda delivered like Amazon Prime on steroids. What I didn't expect, just how bold she'd get once she decided I was too broke to be respected. The final spark that lit the dumpster fire? 3 of my employees, yes, I run a quiet tech firm, showed up for a routine check-in. We were meeting in my dining room, sipping coffee, reviewing spreadsheets, and eating bagels like the dangerous criminals we are. Linda saw them pull up and went full DEFCON Karen. She whipped out her phone like it was a wand of justice, screamed something about unregistered business operations, and called 911 to report an illegal enterprise. I heard every word through my ring mic. We've got code violations, strange cars, and probable money laundering at 114 Sycamore Lane, she said. Send backup. Ma'am, it was bagels. But I wasn't mad. You don't get mad when you already bought the judge's parking spot. I texted my lawyer, Sarah, with just 5 words. She took the bait. Ready? The reply came back faster than Linda files citations, recording, DA notified, light her up. I took a sip of my coffee and opened my violation folder, the one where I had screenshots of every nasty note Linda ever shoved under my door. Porch aggression. No disharmony. Inadequate grasp personality, every one of them written like a passive-aggressive novel by someone who peaked in middle school. And yet, if you watch, sometimes you wear the hoodie on purpose just to see who tries to pull it off. Why did Linda scream, "Get these criminal-looking people off my driveway"? Comment cricket if you think she's about to realize she's been yelling at the man who funds her HOA fanny pack. Linda Cricket once fined her neighbor for having a sensual tomato plant. So imagine her joy when 3 of my coworkers, carrying laptops and banana bread, walked into my house. You'd think we were running an international crime ring called Gluten and Fraud. Linda stood behind her blinds like a budget Dracula, peeking out every 10 seconds like the bagels might escape and violate curfew. I could feel the HOA warning notice being drafted in real time, probably starting with unregistered loaf activity. What she didn't realize was that while she was gathering ammunition, I was gathering evidence, and baby, my aloe vera wasn't the only thing listening. As my friends entered the house for our very legal quarterly meeting, Linda exploded into full HOA battle mode. She stomped outside with a clipboard so big it probably had its own social security number and shouted at Bob Kendall, her faithful but visibly exhausted vice president. "This man is too poor to be legitimate," she snapped, with the vocal energy of someone who drinks room-temperature lemonade and likes it. Bob, whose entire vibe could be described as captive husband energy, nodded slowly while reaching into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I saw it through the lens of my Ring camera. He wasn't calling anyone, he was filming. Bob Kendall was many things. HOA doormat, reluctant peacekeeper, and owner of the saddest backyard koi pond I've ever seen. But today, he was finally interesting. As Linda lectured the empty air about zoning codes and socio-economic consistency, Bob angled his phone like he was live streaming a reality show called The Real Tyrants of Elbow Falls. Meanwhile, inside my house, I was sipping coffee and listening through a mic hidden in my fake succulent. The moment Linda accused me of conducting a transcontinental scheme from a coffee table, I nearly choked on my biscotti. Honestly, if I were running an international operation, you'd think I'd at least use a real desk. Linda, not satisfied with her sidewalk monologue, marched right up to Bob and barked, "Call the police right now! He's hiding strangers in there!" Bob hesitated, looking like a man deciding whether it was finally time to grow a spine or just switch HOAs and enter witness protection. "Maybe we should check first," he said meekly. "They could just be friends or delivery guys." Linda's eyes bulged like a pressure cooker with bad wiring. "Do I need to remind you that your wife's job depends on me?" she hissed, weaponizing HR like it was a stun gun. Bob's jaw tightened. His thumb hovered over the dial, but in his other hand, that camera never wavered. By the time the 911 call began, Linda's tone had shifted from passive-aggressive to full soap opera. "Yes, I'm the president of this HOA," she said, as if she were introducing herself to royalty. "There are unidentified individuals entering a residence owned by a man who, frankly, has a history of financial instability. I believe this is either a front for money laundering or some kind of pyramid scheme involving muffins." I was in my kitchen texting my lawyer the play-by-play while spreading almond butter on a scone. She responded with a gif of fireworks and the words, "DA's watching, let her cook." The louder someone shouts about property values, the more likely their soul is bankrupt and their personalities in foreclosure. Why did Bob wink at the Ring camera while dialing 911? Comment banana if you think he's about to flip the script and serve Linda a steaming subpoena sandwich. You haven't lived until a woman in orthopedic wedges screams, "He's laundering money in a Camry in front of a cop who just wants lunch." Officer Ramos blinked slowly, like he was trying to buffer the stupidity before responding. The other officer, a younger guy named Jennings, already looked like he regretted passing the academy background check. My lawn, my porch, and yes, my Camry, all now part of a criminal investigation, because in Linda Cricket's eyes, no man should own both banana bread and a printer without federal clearance. I welcomed them in with the exhausted grace of someone who had survived 3 HOA notices and a passive-aggressive Christmas wreath audit. Inside, they found the scandal of the century, a spreadsheet open on a laptop, 3 people in cardigans, and a suspiciously large loaf of banana bread. Officer Ramos walked around slowly, inspecting my totally boring setup like he expected a trap door to open. "This is your business headquarters?" he asked. "Yup," I replied. "Where are the embezzlements served with decaf and no cream?" Jennings chuckled and then immediately stopped when Linda stomped in uninvited, like the final boss in a low-budget video game. She carried a manila folder like it was sacred scripture. "This man is a fraud," she announced to the ceiling. "He filed bankruptcy in 2018 and has no right to afford a house with a view." The officers didn't flinch, but I did. Because there it was, my lowest moment, being weaponized like a pie to the face. I watched as Linda dramatically unfolded court documents with the flair of someone who alphabetizes her cereal. He owes millions. He fled responsibility. He's bringing down our property values just by existing. Her voice cracked with self-righteousness. I stood there in my kitchen, my chest tightening like a bad mortgage rate. It was true. I had gone bankrupt. My first startup exploded like a wet toaster in a hot tub. I had watched everything crash. My company, my reputation, my own belief in myself. I remember holding the final investor letter, hands shaking, wondering if I'd ever earn back that kind of trust again. But I'd also clawed my way back, paid every debt, built something real, something stronger. And now, I was watching it almost unravel again, not because of new failure, but because of someone else's desperate need to feel important. Officer Ramos raised an eyebrow at the paperwork. "Ma'am, bankruptcy isn't a crime," he said, voice flat like he'd said it 20 times before. But Linda wasn't done. "You have to arrest him for economic eyesore. And HOA, you have to arrest him for economic eyesore and HOA destabilization," she shrieked. "That's not a law. That's a tabloid headline." Still, the shame it triggered in me was all too real. And just like that, I was back in that courtroom 5 years ago, explaining myself to people who'd already made up their minds. Then it happened. Everyone's phones buzzed at once. Mine, the officers, Linda's, even Bob's, who was still lurking behind a bush with the loyalty of a confused raccoon. A mass email. Subject line, urgent, transition notice. I saw Linda's pupils dilate like she'd just been tasered by karma. "What is this?" she demanded, stabbing at her screen like it owed her money. I just smiled and took another bite of banana bread. Bob looked directly at my Ring camera and gave the faintest nod, like the world's slowest mic drop. Your past isn't your weakness, it's just the prologue, especially when you own the publishing rights. Why did everyone's phone buzz after Linda shouted, "He's a fraud"? Type email if you think justice just hit send and Linda's HOA crown is about to fall off mid-screech. Linda Cricket went from HOA warlord to human iPhone stand when the entire neighborhood got an email that made her legs play Jenga. 1 minute she was screaming about bylaws with the confidence of a courtroom judge in a Netflix drama, and the next she was leaning against my doorframe like gravity had finally filed a complaint. The email, blessed, beautiful, bold, announced that Greystone Management, the parent company of our HOA contract firm, had officially been acquired by Phoenix Avenues LLC. And wouldn't you know it, that's me! Elliot Camry Criminal Parker LLC owner and HOA neck snatcher. Linda stared at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. "This is spam propaganda," she gasped. "It's Russian disinformation, probably AI." Officer Ramos tilted his head like he was listening to a goat explain cryptocurrency. Meanwhile, Bob Kendall, still clutching his phone like it might sing, stepped out of the bush he'd been hiding behind. "Actually, that's real," he said, louder than usual. "The board was notified last night. Elliot's firm acquired Greystone 2 months ago. Full legal process, recorded with the county and everything." He looked down at his notes, then back at Linda with a kind of exhausted pride, like a substitute teacher finally calling out the worst kid in class. The neighbors began whispering, like a middle school lunchroom. Mrs. Dorsey squinted at her phone. "Wait, he owns the HOA now?" Mr. Hernandez looked up from his porch like he'd just seen Elvis. Linda's face went through all 4 stages of disbelief: denial, rage, wheezing, and spiritual collapse. She tried to reboot herself. "He's a bankrupt fraudster with a shady past and suspicious bread," she shrieked. Because apparently banana bread is now contraband. I cleared my throat gently, pulled a legal folder from my backpack, and held it like a magician about to pull a rabbit out of a signed affidavit. "Well then, Linda," I said, "let's take a look at some receipts." I walked calmly to the makeshift podium at the HOA meeting table. Linda tried to block me with her clipboard like it was a medieval shield. I placed the folder down with the satisfying smack of truth. "This is the deed to my house," I began. "Paid in full, $685,000, 0 cents wired from Phoenix Avenue's corporate account. Tracked, verified, cleared." I turned slightly. Bob? Bob adjusted his glasses like a guy who's been waiting 3 years for this moment. Confirmed, he said. I processed the paperwork myself. No loans, no aliases, no schemes. Just clean money from a clean account. And that was the moment Linda realized the only thing laundering around here was her reputation. On a spin cycle, she lunged for the folder like it was the last cruise coupon on Earth. This means nothing! Anyone can print paper! This is all an elaborate scam to undermine me! The crowd flinched. Someone's kid dropped a juice box. Bob held up his phone and played back her earlier shriek, captured on video. He's too poor to be legitimate. The room went silent, the kind of silence that always comes right before karma walks in, wearing stilettos. The people most obsessed with rules are usually just mad they can't find loopholes fast enough when the spotlight turns. Linda's hands are shaking. What's in that folder Elliot just dropped on the podium? Comment folder if you think the next page has the power to flip the HOA throne upside down. I walked into the HOA meeting looking like revenge dipped in Armani. The same people who called me garage sale Jesus last week gasped like I'd risen from the tax bracket grave. My thrift store hoodie had been replaced with a tailored charcoal suit, and the beat-up Camry out front now looked like a decoy in a spy film. I didn't just walk. I glided, the way only a man walks when he knows he owns the building and the Wi-Fi password. Even the flag on the podium seemed to salute me sideways. "Good evening, neighbors," I said, letting the words roll slow like I had all night to roast politely. "I'm Elliot Parker, the man you saw pulling weeds in $12.00 sneakers, and also the CEO of Phoenix Avenues, the firm that now owns Greystone Management." A few jaws clattered to the floor. One guy dropped his LaCroix. "Yup," I continued. "I didn't just buy a house. I bought the HOA." A nervous giggle swept through the crowd. Linda, perched behind the table like a falcon with hemorrhoids, clutched her pearls with the grip of a woman watching her dynasty collapse, one scented candle at a time. I turned serious. And yes, what Linda said earlier is true. I did go bankrupt. My first company imploded harder than a gas station burrito in a microwave, but I paid back every cent, every loan, every investor. I wore failure like a winter coat, and it taught me more than success ever could. You could hear the mood shift in the room. People who used to cross the street when I walked by were now nodding, some visibly moved, others just confused how a guy with a broken porch chair had just reversed the HOA food chain. Then the floodgates opened. Mr. Caldwell raised his hand, voice shaking. "She fined me for having a brown fence post cap," Mrs. Jensen followed. "She threatened to sue me because my garden gnome had a smug expression." One by one, they spilled the truth like a support group for the suburban emotionally violated. Stories of threats, lies, late-night notices taped to windows like eviction valentines. And there was Linda, arms crossed, face stiff with fury, as if Botox had teamed up with shame to shut her down. That's when Linda stood up and made her fatal move. "You don't understand. We have to preserve the elbow falls aesthetic," she howled. "We have standards here. This community was not designed for bankruptcy survivors or people who don't drive German vehicles." The silence that followed could have sliced through marble. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Yikes." Her words hung in the air like wet laundry, loud, unnecessary, and starting to stink. Bob, standing off to the side like he'd just been passed a baton, walked slowly to the projector, holding a USB stick like it was nuclear launch codes. "Speak the truth," calmly, "and it'll echo louder than a stadium full of screaming hypocrites." "What's that USB Bob just plugged into the projector? Type USB if you think it's about to turn this HOA meeting into a streaming scandal for the ages." Linda once fined a guy for painting his garage too happy. What happens next makes that look like a parking ticket. Bob plugged in the USB like he was defusing a bomb, except this one was set to detonate reputations. The screen lit up with timestamps, folders, and a file ominously labeled cricket_purge_compiled_final. It was the kind of name that either ends in handcuffs or a Netflix docuseries. Linda stood, frozen, her mouth twitching like it was searching for a new lie that hadn't already been documented in a... The first clip showed Linda in the HOA office, counting cash like she was auditioning for a mafia reboot. Bill. The HOA $40,000 for landscaping, pay the crew $15, pocket the rest, she said casually, between sips of chamomile tea. Murmurs shot through the room. One guy muttered, "Wait, that's my lawn." Then came emails, invoices, and a glorious paper trail that looked like Enron had joined Pinterest. Her nephew's pool company charging for cleaning during the winter. Her cousin's consulting firm sending $9,000 0-cents bills for PowerPoint slides stolen from a high school economics class. Bob clicked to the next tab like a man flipping over lies like pancakes. Then it got real. Audio filled the room. "If you don't pay the compliance fee, I'll make sure immigration looks into your mother's papers," Linda said coldly, her voice dripping with superiority. The room went silent, the kind of silence where even thoughts seemed to hold their breath. Mrs. Tran, sitting in the back row, gasped and began to cry quietly. Her mother had moved in last year. She'd never told anyone about the threats. Now she didn't have to. Linda had confessed on tape. Linda bolted upright like someone had pulled her power cord. "This is an illegal recording. This is a setup. I demand you shut it off," she screeched, charging toward the projector. But before she could reach it, George from down the block stepped in her path. "Nope," he said flatly, arms crossed like a bouncer at a forgiveness party. "You've made us all sit through 5 years of your nonsense. You're going to sit through this." Another neighbor stood up. Then another. Like dominoes finally standing for themselves instead of falling for her threats. Linda looked around and saw, maybe for the first time, that her power wasn't just crumbling. It had been repossessed. Bob played one last clip, a security cam video of Linda stuffing HOA envelopes into her designer purse right after logging them as destroyed by wind. That wind must have had excellent taste in leather goods. Linda's face was now a haunted museum of regret, pale, twitching, furious, and defeated. Just as she turned to storm out, 2 detectives entered the room with a quiet purpose that felt louder than any of her tantrums. "Linda Cricket, we need to speak with you." She spun around. "You can't do this. This is a witch hunt." The officer didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you're being arrested for fraud, extortion, and abuse of power. Please step away from the cupcakes." Bullies don't need power to thrive. They just need you to stay silent while they swing their clipboard. Did Linda just get cuffed at the podium? Comment waffles if you think she's about to get served hotter than her HOA hot takes. They called it the HO trial from hell. I called it Tuesday. Linda sat in court like a broken Wi-Fi router, blinking, buffering, and losing signal. Her once flawless hair was now a chalky helmet of stress, and her eyebrows had migrated north in panic. The courtroom AC was blasting, but Linda still managed to sweat through her silk blouse like justice had its own thermostat. And me? I brought snacks. Watching a petty tyrant get grilled under oath was my kind of slow-cooker entertainment. 12 charges, count 'em like commandments for HOA villains. Fraud, extortion, embezzlement, wire abuse, illegal compliance fees, you name it, Linda did it and probably monogrammed it. The prosecutor didn't even have to work hard. Most of the case had been served up by Bob's projector and a cast of traumatized neighbors who now sounded like a Greek chorus of the wronged. Every time Linda opened her mouth to deny something, another receipt landed like a hammer made of spreadsheets. She'd ruled elbow falls like a glittery tyrant in orthopedic wedges, but in court, all that sparkle turned to static. When the final guilty verdict dropped, Linda froze in her seat, like she thought the judge might change their mind if she sat still enough. The judge, who looked like she personally disapproved of gluten and incompetence, didn't flinch. "Mrs. Cricket, you are hereby barred from holding any HOA position." "Permanently," she stated, voice like granite dipped in sass. Linda tried to protest with her usual flair. "I made this place. Without me, this community would have turned into a circus." The courtroom laughed, honestly laughed, even the stenographer smirked. I leaned over and whispered to Bob, "Too late. The clown's already been voted off the board." Reforms rolled in faster than Linda could refill her prescription. HOA finances went public. Every resident now got monthly statements more transparent than a toddler's lie. We digitized the complaint process, eliminated nonsense fines like mailbox feng shui violations, and added a neighbors' support fund for elderly residents bullied under Linda's reign. And yes, we held a community potluck where we deep-fried the last copy of the HOA-approved color palette like it was a cursed scroll. People smiled in elbow falls again. That alone was worth every spreadsheet I ever opened. As Linda was escorted out of the courthouse, she shrieked, "You'll all regret this! I know secrets! I built this neighborhood!" Her voice cracked like an expired coupon. The judge didn't even look up. The bailiff nodded like he'd heard it all before. Outside, someone from the local paper snapped a photo. Headline the next day, "HOA Queenpin dethroned by banana bread and backup files." Honestly, I couldn't have scripted it better, Petty. Tyrants always forget that threats expire, but paperwork lasts forever and prints in triplicate. What's Linda doing at Walmart? Why is she yelling at a manager about aisle symmetry? Comment Walmart if you're ready to see what happens when HOA royalty meets 6 months later, HOA meetings had turned into taco nights. The only fine anyone got was for not bringing beer. What used to be dread-filled assemblies with spreadsheets of shame had transformed into backyard hangouts with grilled corn, community hugs, and debates about whether guac should be extra. Elbow Falls was finally living up to its name, a bend in the road where the nonsense ended and neighborly living began. Dennis, our newly minted HOA president, was running things like a cross between Mr. Rogers and a retired Navy SEAL. Monthly budgets were public, every board meeting opened with a joke, and the bylaws got rewritten in plain English plus emojis, because why not? The same guy who once trembled under Linda's reign now stood tall, clipboard free and laugh heavy. Even his wife Sarah had gone from HOA accountant hostage to karaoke queen at our Thursday night socials. Turns out when you stop threatening people over porch decor, they bring you brownies. Now, about Linda. Word got around she was working the night shift at Walmart 2 towns over. Someone spotted her reorganizing the freezer section because these popsicles violate the visual flow of the store. Apparently, she applied to join the employee committee, Walmart's version of a workplace HOA, and got denied faster than a gnome-themed welcome mat. On day 3, she tried to enforce a one-way cart traffic system down aisle 6. It ended in what the staff now call cleanup in aisle fascism. Linda was last seen arguing with a 19-year-old about the proper alignment of toilet paper rows and muttering, "You'll all regret this when I'm assistant manager." As for me, I kept the Camry parked right out front, a tribute to strategic underestimation. I didn't need to flex. I already owned the whole HOA infrastructure, like a man who collects Monopoly boards just to own Boardwalk on principle. We hosted the first annual By Karen BBQ, where neighbors brought everything from ribs to receipts. Someone made a piñata shaped like a clipboard. I gave the closing toast, standing next to Bob and Dennis, beer in hand, Hawaiian shirt flapping like it just filed a motion to party. "To petty fines, loud neighbors, and fruitless threats," I said. "To every chalk art violation and mailbox incident report. To all of it, thank you. Because without that storm, we wouldn't be here, sunburned and free, enjoying actual community instead of emotional HOA detention." Laughter rippled through the yard. Kids played tag without worrying about approved laughter hours. And the tomato plant that once caused a scandal now grew proudly in 3 yards. One even had a tiny sign, "Sensual and legal." Never mistake authority for integrity. Real power isn't about ruling. It's about uplifting. And failure? That's just a comma, not a period, especially when it's followed by, "Oh, by the way, I own this place." The HOA feared a broke neighbor. Turns out they should have feared the one who read bylaws for sport and bought the company. If you've ever been fined for sidewalk chalk or had a tomato plant labeled offensive, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more community comebacks and HOA takedowns. You never know who's watching or who owns your bylaws. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. Let's laugh at the madness together, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story.